Are Germans cold? Are Americans fake? On today's episode of Adventures of Lamati, I'm going to talk about the cultural differences and whether or not these stereotypes are true. Stay tuned to find out. Hello, Lieblings, I'm Madi, author of The Space Hobbit God Queen, who's been living in southern Germany since 2014. On today's episode of Adventures of Lamati, I'm going to talk about the cultural differences between Germans and Americans, and for shits and giggles, I'll throw in some Peruvian in there. I figured after a month of God Queen writing related episodes, I thought we'd get back to what's really important. Expat stuff. But before we get started, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. That lets me know, and YouTube, that you like this sort of content and you want to see more. Here at Adventures of Lamati, we talk about being an expat, being a writer, and sometimes how both happen at the same time. First, I want to preface this by saying that I worked for if you've seen my episode on why I came to Germany, you would hear the story of how I had worked for a German pharma company in Chicago. And one of the things they offered to us, not only German classes, it was also a cultural sensitivity course. The idea was so that we Americans could understand our German colleagues better. Actually, in all honesty, it would have been best for both cultures to learn about the other one better, but by the time they finally got around to giving out this course, most of the Germans that were working there had already gone back to Germany, so it was mostly just Americans in that cultural sensitivity course, but whatever. It was still really, really interesting, and I learned a lot, and I want to talk about some of those topics that were mentioned in this course, because actually having this idea of Germans before I even moved to Germany really helped me. So we'll start with the first topic, number one. That is coconuts versus peaches. So I guess you're wondering what does that mean? So in this cultural sensitivity course, Germans were compared to as coconuts and Americans were peaches. That means coconuts, they have a hard exterior and a fleshy innards. And I do find that to be very true with Germans. They do come off as cold and unfriendly at first, but I actually don't like that description of them. I actually prefer reserved. They're just more reserved, or in a lot of ways they're just shy. So they do come off as reserved, and it does take time to break that hard exterior. But when you do, you find a very different innard. With a coconut, the exterior and the interior are very different, and I feel like that is what you find with Germans. Especially once they allow you to, excuse my English, but to penetrate that exterior, you find that they are some of the most loyal and friendly people and warm people that you will meet. And knowing that before moving to Germany was really helpful, because I knew it's different than in the States where you come in and everybody's like, hey, whoa, what's up, woohoo? I'll get to that in a moment. But when you come to Germany, I mean, everybody is, they're polite and they're cordial with you, but it takes a little bit more to get past that first barrier. But when you do, once they make that decision, it's really fun. It's really cool. They're great friends. I have some really awesome friends who are Germans, and obviously since I live here, but it was great. Now with the peaches, that's Americans, because it's this fleshy outside with a very hard core. So as Americans, you may not realize that. I didn't actually realize that until this cultural sensitivity course, but the fleshy outside is essentially the outer portrayal. We seem soft, we're colorful, we're vibrant, and we're sweet. We try to be welcoming, we try to be nice, and I will admit to a lot of Germans it's very off-putting, and I've actually been called fake a number of times, or not even just me, but having Germans tell me that they think Americans are fake because of this. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie, there are some days where you don't feel like being in a good mood and you don't feel like being friendly, but your mom raised you to be polite, so you're gonna be friendly anyway. But look at it this way, does it actually cost you anything to be nice to people? Which in the end is, I think, why, especially in the Midwest, where I'm from, that's why we're friendly with everybody, because it doesn't cost you anything to be a decent human being, just strangers. I think also because we are a very religious nation, even though we do have separation of church and state, but you know, the whole like, what would Jesus do? And he would be friendly. I do notice it's a big mindset change when I go back to the States. I actually do feel lighter and happier when I'm back home, just to be around people that just are like, oh, hey, how you doing? Oh, that purse looks so nice. And oh, this, you know, it's very different than when you come back to Germany, and it's not like that. Not like that at all. But that's okay. It's okay. There are niceties in other ways, not the in your face way that we Americans do. But while we are friendly and vibrant on the outside, there's that really hard core that very few people can actually penetrate and get to. I mean, I am friendly. I have friends all over the place. I can count on one hand, some on this second hand. I can't really think of the number off the top of my head, but it's definitely less than 10 people that have actually seen that inner core. Like, I have my public persona, my internet persona, and yes, it's friendly and I smile and it's all great, but the real me, not many people actually get to see that. And that is how we Americans are. We have, you know, our classification of circle of friends is different. With Germans, you have everyone's acquaintance, and then you have the small group that's your friends. And with Americans, like, we have friends, and then we have acquaintances, and then you have like the best friends, the best friends. As Mindy Kaling said in the Mindy Project, friendship is not best friend is not a person, it's a tier. And you want to know what fruits Peruvians are? Chirimoyas. Because it's Peruvian and we're unforgettable, and to be frank, since it wasn't really part of the cultural sensitivity course, we got no fruits. So I just picked a Peruvian fruit. So we'll go on into the second topic, and that is work culture. To be honest, there's really not much of a difference. I mean, I know a lot of Germans say that they work harder than Americans. In a way that's true, but let's look at the numbers as to why it would appear so. On this side, we have Americans. You get, maybe if you're lucky, 10 days vacation. You may get six days. You are expected usually to work a minimum of 50 hours a week, even if your contract states 40. That happened to be on my first job. On the other side, we have Germans. So you have 30 days vacation. Your sick days are actually dictated by your doctor. When you get sick and you go to see the doctor, he will decide in the end and write off how many days off you're sick. And you're not allowed to work if you have a normal contract. If you're not an AT, so Außertarif, you can only work maximum 10 hours a day. So that means you can only work maximum 50 hours a week compared to the Americans, which is minimum 50 hours a week. And when you look at that with the vacation, and if you're sick, you know, you could be out for weeks at a time. Who knows? You know, that's, and then you try to see how much, you know, the workload in the end is the same. Germans actually have to do the same amount of work in less time than Americans. So the mindset is just simply different. You have less time to get it done, and you have to get it done. And with Americans, it's like, well, I'm expected to be here at least 50, 60 hours. And a lot of times it's just your butt has to be there, whether or not you actually have enough to do or not. So it's a different mindset. And I do prefer this, the lifestyle with Germans. It can be very intense because those deadlines are even harder, I think, than with Americans, because you don't, you know, you only have 10 hours in a day to get that work done. And when you're, you know, and the reason for that is because it's to prevent people from getting overtired and actually getting into an accident. If you do, for some reason, have to work more than 10 hours, your boss has to give special permission, because if something happens to you, they are liable. So if you do have to work more than 10 hours and your boss has signed off on it, you are expected to take a taxi home, and the company will pay for it. Because again, they don't want you to be so tired that you can get into a car accident. Again, your boss is liable, because why else would you be working so hard? It's usually because you got some kind of project or something from your boss and suddenly you have to get all this stuff done. So they have to be mindful of these things as well. They cannot push you like American bosses do, which just, they expect you, again, to work minimum 50 hours a week. Taking those aspects out of the equation, I have worked in Germany for 5 years for 2 different companies. I have worked for a German company in the States, and I've worked for American companies. Again, the overall work culture isn't really that different. It may feel like it, but it's really not. And it is different compared to Peruvian or South American and Japanese. So the big difference with that, they actually used a meeting metaphor. So when Europeans or North Americans go into a meeting, you go and you do the meeting. Like, you don't waste time. You start with, whatever the topic of the day is or whatever, and then you move from there, because work is based on work, what you output. With Japanese and South American cultures, small talk is very, very important, because interpersonal relationships with your colleagues is very, very important. And I say this because I was raised by a Peruvian woman. So I learned the South American work ethic, which is be nice to everybody, be really friendly, and treat them all like fucking people. Because if you need a favor, chances are you'll get that favor granted if you're nice. It was a little thing, and I never actually noticed it. With my first job, I would actually sometimes go to production and talk to them and get to know them. And in the end, a lot of times my boss would be sending me to production when favors were required, or even just results for a test or whatever was required, because they would more likely respond to my emails. They would actually respond to me as opposed to some other colleagues. And I realized that I had this ability. And so when I actually came to this German company, and it was in the States, it was a company at that point was about 45 people. And I thought, it's the perfect environment to really get to know everybody, really, really, because they were so small. And I went, and during the first 6 months where I only had to read SOPs the whole time and there was nothing else for me to do, I would take advantage and go to production, go to engineering, go to IPC, go to the different groups and talk to them and get to know them. And there was one of the German colleagues that hated it. And as a result, he hated me and started spreading rumors about me. Fortunately, because I went and I was nice to everybody and everybody knew who I was, those rumors never went far. They all saw him for the petty bitch he was. Excuse my language. But it was a big clash, like a culture clash in work ethic and working mentality. And when we did this cultural sensitivity course, and they finally, this is how North Americans and Europeans work versus South Americans and Japanese, I raised my hand and I was like, y'all got all pissed off about me doing blah, blah, blah. I was raised by a South American woman. This is why, please stop being angry with me. This is just how I work. Stop. I've never had a problem after that, but it was really, really refreshing to learn that this was a difference, because part of me had wondered why, if there was something wrong with me, because I watched my mom do it. My mom is freaking awesome. She's awesome. There's no other better adjective for this woman. And I see how her personal relationships with everyone she works with. I wanted to emulate that, and I like being that kind of person that can, not only have to go to production just for, blah, 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 X, Y, and Z. I go to them because we're also friends, in a work environment. We're not besties or anything, going back to the whole peaches and coconuts. They're not quite to that inner core yet, but at the same time, I'm not going to just treat them like that's all they're good for is for the results I need. It makes a huge difference. And number 3 is brutal honesty. Do not ask a German a question if you are not prepared for their response. And it's not to be rude. It's not to be rude. It's simply because they genuinely, they think you do want the truth. Like if you're going to ask, oh, how does this scarf look on me? You know, and it somehow doesn't clash with my skin or it just doesn't match the outfit, they will tell you. Sometimes they'll also tell you things that you can't necessarily control. Like, oh, you have a stain on your shirt. I know. I'm well aware. Thanks for pointing it out in front of everyone. It happens. They are quick to point out if you do something wrong or breaking the law. For example, jaywalking. Jaywalking is a big one. In big cities, I mean, in big cities. I live in a very small village, and as much as you have these German stereotypes, they're all, you know, they follow the letter of the law to the T, or they're always on time, which I will get on this later, but like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I live in this little bubble in this village where that's not necessarily the case. There's a little more flexibility. So yeah, jaywalking in this little village is not a problem. I have another American expat friend of mine who pointed out that the reason why Germans will tell you these things, you know, oh, don't jaywalk, or don't, I don't know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Usually jaywalking is the go-to example that we expats use. But it's because they feel like they're looking out for you. They see, you know, like Germans very much think about the community as a whole. Like if one person breaks the law, then suddenly everybody's going to think that they can break the law. And these laws are in there for a purpose. Don't jaywalk because a car can hit you, you know, like for your own personal safety. It's not to be mean. As an American, it can be annoying, but it's not, it's very rarely ever malintent. And with Peruvians, honestly, I am used to the brutal honesty, especially with my weight. I've had from relatives who have asked me what had happened because I used to be so skinny, or it's such a shame because I used to be so skinny. Yeah, so when it comes to Latin relatives, yeah, they will be honest. They will be absolutely honest with you. So coming to Germany, I wasn't that surprised. Americans, on the other hand, you know, we do try to be polite. We try to avoid conversations that could result in some kind of conflict. An example of this is, I was sitting down with coworkers here in Germany, and we were talking about food, and I had talked about some recipe that I had come up with, and one of my coworkers was like, oh, I hate that. That sounds gross. That's a very German response to just to you know, that it's just a normal conversation. But an American wouldn't even dream of saying that because that could make people uncomfortable. And we Americans, oh God, no, make people uncomfortable? No. So I remember feeling like, oh, this little, like my stomach dropped a little bit when my coworker said that, because I was just like, I don't care if you hate it. Like, why do you feel the need to say it? But that's just part of German conversations. And they will just tell you their opinion, whether they think something that you're doing or something that they don't care, because they're in being inclusive in the conversation, and they'll be honest about what they think. And number 4, we're going to talk about free time clothes, or FREIZEIT, KLAMOTTEN, or Kleidung, or whatever you want to call it in German. You see, in Germany, or at least in parts of Germany, I'm only speaking of the area I live in because that's the exposure I have. I don't know about in the north. When a German comes home from work, you know, they're always usually dressed very chic but casual, in my American opinion. They come home, they change into sweatpants and a sweatshirt, and that is their FREIZEIT Klamotten, their free time clothes. This is what they wear when they're lounging at home, which is different from pajamas. When it's time to go to bed, they will change out of their FREIZEIT Klamotten and they will change in their pajamas. And then when they get up in the morning, they'll get out of bed, change into their FREIZEIT Klamotten, and then go and have breakfast. I, as the American, will just be in pajamas. I don't care. For me, there is no difference because I will sleep in sweatpants and a sweatshirt. I don't notice a difference. Though it has been noticed by my in-laws. I do live in the family house. You may have seen in previous videos, which means I also live with my mother-in-law, besides my husband. And that means the grandkids come over pretty often, or my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and you know, their brood, they come over. Sometimes I will still be in my pajamas. It's usually because I don't know that they're coming until they're at the door, and I'm not going to stand around in full makeup and hair done and no, waiting in case they come over. Like, they're going to see me in my full pajamic glory if they don't call ahead of time. But they'll see me and they're like, oh, did you sleep in? I'm like, no, I have a puppy. I've been up since 6 in the morning. I just don't change my clothes. But it's a thing here. It's a thing here in Germany to have your FREIZEIT Kleidung and your pajamas to be separate things. I don't, and I will never change. You can fight me on that. I like having my coming home and going straight into my pajamas if I'm not going back out, and just leaving it at that. What do you guys think? I mean, I never really ask questions on these videos, and this would be a good time to ask. What do you think, especially with this topic? Are you Germans, are you like hardcore Freizeit Kleidung, or do you really care? Americans, what do you think of the idea? Do you have clothes that you change into when you come home and then change into pajamas? Or you just say, you know, fuck it and just wear your pajamas? Leave that in the comments below. I would love to hear your opinions. And topic number 5 is planning. I actually never owned a calendar. I mean, okay, I had a calendar in my phone, but I never actually used it until I moved to Germany. And I know actually it does feel like that with adults, even in the States. You know, you do have to plan things out like 6 months in advance, but in Germany, like, you really have to plan everything. If you want to go to a nice, you know, restaurant on a certain, you know, I don't know, especially during the weekend, like when I lived in Ravensburg, you had to make a reservation because you were not going to get a seat anywhere. Everybody does reservations. Or if you want to get your hair done, there are rarely places where you can just walk in and get a haircut. You had to usually plan it like 2 weeks in advance. Same with getting your nails done. Same with, I mean, just anything. Except for doctor's appointments. Usually if you're feeling sick, and I say this because, you know, the whole like socialized healthcare argument that Americans make, that you have to wait forever in socialized healthcare. That's not the case in Germany. If I was sick and I needed an appointment, I got one the same day. But with other trivial things like a haircut or nails or nice fancy restaurants, you did have to plan ahead, or even with your friends. Weekdays, you know, usually you work, and sometimes you do, depending on where you live, you know, you can plan things in the evening, but everything had to be planned. Everything has to be on a calendar. In the US, you know, I only plan things max 2 weeks in advance, because that's how much data I can kind of hold in my head planning wise. So for example, when I was planning my birthday party, I wouldn't tell people about my plans until 2 weeks before, because usually that's when most Americans would know what, you know, they usually only knew about 2 weeks, you know, a 2 week window. Here in Germany, if you don't plan at least a month in advance, no one's going to come. I actually tried a last minute planning, and by last minute, I said like a month in advance, for my 5th year anniversary in Germany. And it was just my relatives that showed up, my in-laws, because my friends all had plans. It was as simple as that. I had to plan several months in advance if I wanted them to come. That is the reality in Germany. If you want to do something, you have to plan. In the States, 2 weeks is a good window to plan. Peruvians, yeah, we're a very flexible bunch. We just gotta, if we decide we want to go do something, we'll just kind of do it. This kind of also goes into the topic of punctuality. Like, Germans stereotypically are known to be very punctual. That's a stereotype. But honestly, I don't really notice much of a difference between Americans and Germans. Usually, or maybe it's because of the area that I live in. Usually it's like, if you're going to be late, like, yeah, 5 to 10 minute window, you know, that's okay. And then if it's more than that, usually I would find out. But I don't see a difference with punctuality between Americans and Germans. Like, it's, you know, to be early is on time, to be on time is to be late, blah, blah, blah. I see more similarities than not between the two cultures. As opposed to Peruvians or Latinos in general, there is Latino time, which is a minimum of a half hour to an hour late. The funny story, my cousin got married. Well, which cousin? I have like a million of them. But one of my cousins got married in Peru. This was like early 2000s, I think. And she purposely put on the wedding invitation that it was a half hour earlier than it actually was, because she knew everybody would be a half hour late to the wedding. It's a joke that we tell now, but that is the reality. There are plenty of relatives that we also have had to kind of lie and tell them that, you know, a certain event starts an hour or two earlier so that they would be on time. That's just what you have to do. And ironically, I also know Germans that do that as well. So again, this it may be a stereotype, but yeah, I don't see it that often. Anyway, those are the topics I have for this video. If you have any more that you would like to hear about what I think, you know, between Germans and Americans, and maybe even some Peruvian ones, let me know. I can easily make another video. And so thanks for joining me. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. I do talk more about writing. There'll be more expat stuff coming along in the coming weeks. But in the meantime, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell and hit all the good stuff. Please, please, please. And consider also giving this video a thumbs up, because it also lets YouTube know that you like it. Like it? What do you like this sort of stuff? If you have any other comments or any other topics you'd like to see on this channel, please leave it in the comment section below. I'll try to get back to you on that. Actually, no, I will get back to you on that. The God Queen is available on ebook and paperback. I have all the links below. And be sure to connect with me on my social media, either through Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Also, check out my newsletter, where you will get the most up-to-date information on books, projects, pugs, and giveaways. Just for subscribing, you'll get a free character sheet to use, as well as the first 6 chapters of my debut space opera, The God Queen. And that's it for today. Until next time, ade!